Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Design Recharge. I'm not sure the number, I think it's like 136 maybe, 137. But I'm excited to have Gage Mitchell here of Modern Species. He's in Seattle, but he's lived all over. He's going to give us a little bit of his background, but I'm really excited that you're here, Gage. I saw him when I was in Raleigh at an AIGA event, and he spoke about working your passion. And I took so many notes. And so I was like, oh my goodness, I've got to get you on the show. And I really did. It was like 15 pages of notes, and it was like half a sheet. So it was pretty good amount of notes. And like 45 minutes, it wasn't super long, but it was really good. And so I really wanted to have him on. So here he is. And I have a couple new things we're going to try today. There's these polls. So if you're new, you can chat over there on your right-hand side. And you'll be able to see, you can chat to each other, you can ask questions, feel free. I try to really read that chat. And if you have a question, I really want to get that answered. So y'all are a priority. And so I'm going to try these polls today. So I'm going to try the first one right now. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But I'm going to load it right now. So it says, how many of you feel like you're doing work, let's see, that you are passionate about? So yes, no, somewhat, but I'd like to do more. Do you guys see that poll? Do you see it, Gage?
I do.
Okay, sweet. You may have to click polls. I don't know. So some people are answering, so that's awesome. So I'm going to let Gage give us a little introduction of when he fell in love with design and a little bit of your background. Whenever you're ready.
All right.
As you take a sip, I'm sorry.
No worries. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining. My name, obviously, is Gage Mitchell. I got involved with, or my background, I guess, is since a very young age, like elementary school, I was super excited about business. I come from a long line of entrepreneurs. And so when I was going to elementary school on like dress-up days, I would wear a suit and carry a briefcase because I wanted to be just like my grandfather, my mother, or whomever else who had their own business. And I also came from a very artistic family where drawing and sculpting and doing any sort of creative exercises was definitely something we did as a family. And over time, I kind of had my passions with both of them. I was constantly starting businesses out of my lockers in elementary school or junior high, where I was like buying candy in bulk and then like selling it with a markup, and like I had like spreadsheets and all sorts of different things.
Wow.
And then I had all my studio art classes and different cool craft projects I had on the side. But one day, and this is sort of embarrassing to admit, but I was watching the movie Boomerang with Eddie Murphy, where he's an advertising executive, and I realized that this whole idea of the design world or advertising world was really a combination of both art and business. And it was that moment that I thought, well, maybe that's what I want to do later in life when I, go off to college or anything else. I had no idea what that meant. It just seemed cool because you could wear a suit and talk about art at the same time, which sounded pretty cool.
How old were you when you watched that? Do you know?
I don't remember. I want to say it was somewhere like in my early teens or something that I realized that that was a potential profession. So probably
I think
sometime junior high.
I think you're younger than me. I think a good bit. But so when I was growing up, I watched Bewitched, and I loved that show. And Darren Stevens was an ad exec. So I didn't really want to wear a suit, clearly, by what I'm wearing. But I did think it was cool. So I think it's funny that TV really influences that.
Yeah, I think, to that point, it would be nice if there were more opportunities. With all these reality TV shows, there's, people from every different walk of life has their own TV show, and it would be great if someone within the design community could be featured more frequently, because then we would have more people within the design world, in theory.
Yeah.
Not that we all want more competition or anything.
I think there's enough to go around. Yeah. So one thing when you were talking in Raleigh that really stuck out was that you are very passionate about what you're doing and the design that you're doing, and you really like it. And I always wonder when I see people in their field and they really look like they're just in it and they're loving it. Is this something that you have always been this in love with, or is this something that you developed? It has continued to grow, I guess. Is this a love that's grown?
Yeah. I mean, when I went into college, I honestly didn't know much about what design was. I was debating between some of my interests of architecture I thought could be cool. And really, when I looked into myself, I realized I just really wanted to design my own house. So maybe not pursuing a career where you had to spend like 10 years as a intern basically until you got to design your own thing. But I'm thinking about architecture, graphic arts, or communication design, as they called it at some point. And then also culinary arts, because I always loved food and loved cooking, but also realized that it would be much harder to make it in the culinary arts, just the work style, like always being on your feet and working your way up and to eventually own your own restaurant, which almost always fail. I felt like the graphic design world would be a safe bet. So I went into it not really knowing what it was all about. And I have to say that, yes, eventually, like, my passion for design grew over time the more I learned what it was. I definitely went into art school as more of a traditional artist and came out a designer. And since then, the more I practice design and the more I see, terrible kerning on a sign or like an ad that's really poorly done or anything, even if we're talking about like systems design, I think about like a customer service systems when I call into a company to give them some feedback. And all those different pieces make me love design more and more, because I realize how much power we have as designers to change things, to make them more functional, to make them more beautiful, to make them more sustainable, hopefully.
Right. All right. So one thing, when you were in Raleigh, your talk was this one pot life and how to make and merge kind of your passion into what your work was. And, there really is, we get conflicting advice all the time. And I'm going to read what I wrote so that because I wrote it better than I can re-say it. We hear conflicting advice all the time. So it's hard to achieve the work-life balance. And then you also have to hustle all the time, that mentality. So how do you handle the struggle? Because it seemed like from your talk in Raleigh, you've kind of figured out a way and it works now. And I don't know if it always has, but it seems like you've figured out what works for you. And then we'll talk more about that.
Yeah, it's definitely a work in progress. I think everything is, but for sure, I feel like I've started striking the right, not necessarily balance, but right combination of interest within my career. Mm-hmm. As I've mentioned, I've been into business for a long time. I've been into design for a shorter amount of time, but now a long time. I've been into art for a long time. I've been into food and sustainability for a while as well. And for me, my recipe for my one pot life, as I was calling it during that talk, is that slowly but surely I'm finding a way to build a business or build a career out of combining all those things together into one, so that my work day itself can be fulfilling and fun and rewarding, as opposed to, I feel like there's a common theory out there that work needs to just be work, where you make your money and then you go home and that's where your interests are. That's where your passion is, like on the weekends or nights, evenings, whatever. And when you think about it, you spend so much more time, let's say like 80-90% of your time at work, and then you only get that 10 or 20% of time at home for your passion. So I feel like it almost seems like a waste of time to just segment those and keep them separate. Why work 60 hours a week or something doing a job that you don't really like, if you could actually spend that time doing something that fulfills some of your passions as well? So that's my personal recipe, has been combining things that I have interest in throughout my career and throughout my life. For me, it's ended up with this company that I run called Modern Species, which is a sustainable brand design studio. And we focus mostly on food and beverage and personal care products. And we get to work with awesome, passionate people that are trying to make the world a better place, which appeals to my, do-gooder sustainability ethos. But then we also get to work with food clients, where we'll get a delivery, a shipment of, a box full of chocolate samples, for example, which is hard to resist. And then we also work with the occasional social cause or something like that, like helping change the healthcare industry is one of our clients, trying to make breastfeeding awareness more accessible to everybody, and it's really interesting project where they're figuring out a system design to help people throughout the process. But so my personal formula has been, screw this whole work-life balance thing And what about a work-life imbalance where I just combine the two together?
So before you started Modern Species, you were designing and you actually took a hiatus and you traveled, I think, but I'm not sure all the timeline. But you talked about some different kinds of people. Like there was the one friend that does these like Ironman or kind of triathlon things, and that's all he really talks about. But he does have a job. But you thought of him like he would be so much better. Could you talk a little bit about that and like your boss at one of your old companies that's a big runner?
Yeah. So I'm sure we've all been hearing this lately, but there's a lot of talk about work-life balance. And from what I can tell, I get it from two different angles. So there's the angle of you need to work your ass off and work harder than everyone else in your field in order to succeed, in order to get that job that you want, in order to get those clients that you want, or anything else. So I've been brought up with that kind of work ethos where you just need to constantly put in the hours and put in the effort and work harder so that you can end up at a higher place later in life. And then we also hear these arguments where Americans have a really unhealthy relationship with work, where we've, over the past 30 years or so, have increased our efficiency like 400%, yet our pay rate hasn't gone up nearly as much. And so people are talking more about this work-life balance situation where you shouldn't work your ass off. You should just clock your 9 to 5, maybe work smart within those hours, and then go home and do your passion project on the side or spend time with your family. And I've started kind of thinking of those two different fields in terms of thinking that there's the type of person who likes to keep work and life separate, like my friend that you were talking about, who I've known him since I was a kid in elementary school. We played soccer together, but every time we hang out, I don't think I ever really hear him talk about his job. I'll ask him about it and he'll say, yeah, it's fine, whatever. And he doesn't seem to really love what he's doing, or maybe he just doesn't think I would understand it or something, but he just doesn't talk about it very much because he is an engineer, so you never know. But he doesn't talk about it very much, but what he does talk about and what he does get excited about is this Tough Mudder competition where he gets to compete against other people in these crazy obstacles where you might get shocked by electricity or dumped in a bucket of ice or whatever else. And you just have to go through these challenges. And he's one of those people that basically started doing things like that on the side, CrossFit or whatever. And he started getting so obsessed with it that it almost basically took over his life to the point where he's more a Tough Mudder than he is an engineer. And he just lives for that, and he gets excited and he brings all of his friends to the competition to cheer him on, and it just consumes him. But that's only like that 10 or 20% of his life. Whereas I feel like if he actually enjoyed what he did for a living, maybe he wouldn't need to let Tough Mudder consume him. Maybe he would actually get excited about his actual job and go home and tell people about the cool stuff he's doing at work. Right. Not to say that you can't have hobbies or anything. I'm just saying maybe there's an unhealthy trend developing in this country where we work so much towards something that we don't care about that we then turn it around and be equally obsessive over something that is just a hobby that you spend 10% of your time on.
Do you think that some of it has to do with that you're working for someone else and that you're not as passionate? Or do you, because I mean, me and you both have our own businesses, but I also work for a university and I'm extremely passionate about giving the students what they need. Even though I'm working for someone else, I feel like, you know what I mean? Like some people might have that, well, I'm just working for the man. I don't have to deal with that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I've put some thought into that, and I do think there's absolutely ways where people can do more of their passion even when you're working for somebody else. One example I had recently, we were giving a talk on sustainable design at a local university, and one of the students came up to us afterwards and was talking about a struggle and asked if she could touch base later. So we talked to her later, and she had some struggles with a job that she had where she was working for a very sustainable company, but they didn't recycle anything, and this was a retail store. And she said, I want to make change, but every time I talk to them about it, they make up a million excuses for why it can't happen. So can you give me some advice? So we just gave her general advice on behavior design or different things about how if you make things easy, then it's more likely to be implemented, etc. So she went back and pitched them on an idea of, let me come up with a plan for recycling for the store, and I'll make it, something that's easy to implement and takes no extra work, more or less, from everyone else. And if I do that, will you implement it? And they said, sure, we'll give it a shot. So she went back and she wrote up a plan and came up with it, pitched it, did a trial run, whatever. And when I ran into her a month or so ago at an event, she was giving me an update, and they have successfully implemented this and now recycle all their cardboard waste and a bunch of other things too. So within this giant company, and for the big surprise at the end, that store was Apple Retail here in Washington.
Wow.
It's a very sustainable company. They just didn't, take that extra effort to recycle. But she was able to influence a giant change within her own company just by following her own passions. And myself, when I've had jobs, I've found that most of the time, and not all the time, I have to be cautious there.
Right.
Employers are very happy to see employees, going a little bit above and beyond to try to build something they are passionate about. There's always some sort of like company culture club that you can get involved in, or maybe you can help start the recycling program, or maybe you can start like a give back program where you set up volunteer days or whatever. Or even when you're searching for a job, you can search for jobs within a field that you actually like, instead of going with the field that your parents said is the most, viable option for you or something.
Right. I see that a lot. Like I see kids who are like, well, I don't really want to major in this, or my parents don't want me to. And I was like, well, or it makes them so that they are changing over there and I have another 2 or 3 years worth of school. And they were like, yeah, I just can't do that. I'm like, but you're going to do this for 40 years. You think 3 years of your life, it's not worth it? I mean, like, to me, that's like a drop in the bucket. 3 years is going to go by like that.
Yep.
What would you say to somebody in that situation? Like, even if it's somebody that says, hey, I'm 28 and I'm kind of sick of where I am. I've always thought I wanted to do design, or, I'm in the design field, but I don't feel like I'm doing the type of work that I want to do. Because I think that's where some people are. And I don't think they're just 28-year-olds. I think it could be, 45-year-olds, and they're like, I'm just still not doing the design work. What would you tell somebody? And I know these aren't questions that are on our sheet. Sorry about that.
I'm just thinking, like, there's so many different ways to answer this. So first of all, I would say that there are definitely a lot of people out there that take a job to get a job because the economy was rough or whatever else. And it may not have been the thing they're passionate about, or maybe they weren't qualified to get the job they were passionate about. But I think any job is a good job so long as you're learning and growing as a professional. But as soon as you hit that point where you're no longer learning, that's where you either need to, one, as an employer, I would say first go to your employer and say, here's my problem. Like, I feel like I've gotten everything I can out of this position. Is there anything more for me here? Because I would always rather keep a good employee than see them go off to a competitor or something.
Right.
Two, if there are no opportunities for your growth at your current job, then start looking for another job, because if you're not growing, you're dying, as somebody said. I can't remember who. So finding something new where you can grow personally is really crucial. And a lot of people don't do that just because they're afraid of what might happen, afraid of telling their boss that they've worked with for 3 years that they're leaving, or afraid that this next job won't be the one that they want. So if you can get over that fear, then I think hopefully you'll be able to inspire yourself to make a change, and then definitely find something that you're passionate about. I see that you maybe got a chat or something. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. So Dan's asking, are you saying that aligning with a company's mission statement is vital to design inspiration? Is that what you're asking, Dan? Anyway, maybe he'll type that.
Before he confirms, I would say, for me, yes, because I am the type of designer that feels like I need to be contributing my skills to something I believe in. That's not necessarily the case for everyone else. So with Modern Species, we only work with clients whose products or values that we believe in some way, shape, or form. However, that's not for everybody. This is just my personal formula that I've set up. If you're totally fine putting in 60 hours a week working to sell cigarettes or something, that's totally up for you. If your passion is more coming up with an awesome campaign or coming up with a great execution for this illustration project, but you don't really care who that's for, then you should find those projects. Find whatever makes you happy and figure out what your values are, and then figure out a way to build your life around that. My values are just working with companies I believe in. So.
And I also think that's something that you build with time. You weren't able maybe to start from the beginning of when you were 23 and you graduated from college working just for companies that you wanted. I think that's part of the experience that you gain and the expertise that you get as a business owner. And I think that's something that you can control now. And Carlos said, hey, yeah, so that's so true. But the fear of not paying bills is so powerful. And I agree. But I think there's a balance. But you could say, hey, I'm not going to work for cigarette companies, since you already mentioned that.
No.
I'm not going to work for cigarette companies, or I'm not going to work for anything that doesn't go with my moral beliefs. And I really believe you have to know what your beliefs are and try to find a client that at least shares three. You are in line, in sync with at least with three of yours, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And to touch on that, you need to pay the bills talk. Absolutely. Like, everybody has different life priorities. For me, freedom is one of my life priorities, where I don't have any debts. Like, my wife and I only buy something if we can pay for it in full. Paid off all my student loans. I've, with the way we grow our businesses, we put 20 or 30% in a savings account for the business, so that when we need to buy new equipment or something, we don't need a loan. So there's all sorts of situations that allow us the freedom to say no to projects when we don't want a project. And also, we're just small and we don't pay ourselves super well. But hey, that's because we value more working with clients we believe in. But if you have 5 kids at home and a spouse staying at home and you're the sole breadwinner, then yeah, you're going to probably have to make some compromises in your life in order to afford that. However, that doesn't mean that you can't always be looking for a better opportunity. And that doesn't mean within the company that you're working at, you can't find ways to make it more enjoyable or more rewarding for you by stepping up and asking for better opportunities. So I would say everyone has a different life priorities and a different balance that they need to strike, but there's always a way to make it work a little bit better for you than for the man.
Right. And it doesn't always happen automatically, is what I'm trying to get across. I think it's I've had clients that I didn't really like, or I liked the work, but I didn't really like the client. And so, you get to a stage where you can kind of let that client go, and you can, it's a stage. It's not something like, yeah, I'm not working for you because you're a jerk. You still need to pay the bills. So,
Absolutely.
So you talked about your wife. And so this was a really interesting part of your talk at Raleigh, AIGA Raleigh. I was trying to RAGA is what I was about to say. RAGA.
RAGA.
Yeah. How did bringing your wife on full-time as a partner change your work, change your marriage? Can you talk about both of those things?
Yeah. So when I started this company, we had just gotten back from traveling, taking a little sabbatical and traveling in Eastern Europe and Southeast Asia for a while. And when we got back, it was the bottom of the economy, basically. So we looked for a place that was relatively affordable to live. My wife went and got a job, and I just started looking for what the design opportunities in town were. I quickly realized that there, was nobody hiring somebody at like a middle to senior level experience. And for what I wanted to do, like doing something sustainable, there was literally nobody in the area. So that caused me to just go take some business classes to figure out what it would take to run my own business at the local university. So I did that, met my first client in that class who happened to run a sustainable bake shop, or wanted to open a sustainable bake shop. We became quick friends and eventually got to work on that project. But my business started slowly but surely. I think the first year I probably billed like less than $20,000, of business, because it just takes time to grow, as you said, like especially when you have something specific in mind of what you want to do. So during that time, my wife was working a different job to pay the bills, running an office for a construction company, basically. And at a certain point, I just got to the point where I was so busy that on nights and weekends, my wife would come home from her job stressed out and wanting to just relax and hang out with me. And I was constantly freaking out about the deadline I had coming up, because as a one-person show, trying to do all the work, like big branding projects or whatever, all by yourself, new business, etc., it's exhausting. So I was working nights and weekends to try to get this thing off the ground. And eventually, and she was always getting frustrated that we didn't get to hang out. But eventually, it got to the point where I said, I need to hire somebody. And she said, no, I'm going to come work for you, or with you, I guess I should say. So instead of me hiring somebody to do design so I could do the business stuff, she came on to help me with the business stuff. So I think for us, it worked out in that it allowed us to spend more time together, which we actually really love. And I think what makes it work, though, is that we do different things. So she comes from a creative writing background, has a lot of office management experience, and really loves things like bookkeeping, whereas I hate things like bookkeeping, but love business strategy. I don't mind dealing with clients, and I can do the design. So it made sense that we could work together without ever having to battle or fight over anything. And for us, it was just a great solution to spend basically 24 hours a day together, and grow the business in a way where we both had the same ethos. We both knew that what we wanted to work for clients we believed in, and we were both willing to make sacrifices by downgrading our cost of living in order to grow a small business.
So it was better for your business, and also it was better for your marriage, right?
Absolutely. And I can't say that's going to be the case for everybody, because there are a lot of husband-wife business teams, and we've worked with a few that have ended in divorce after we've done their branding and launched their company. And we've worked with some that succeed very honorably, and we even have a blog somewhere on our website about how to work with your spouse. But
oh, that's cool.
If you have the right combination, for me, I think the formula is if you divide and conquer, like do different things, and if you're okay spending a lot of time together and not fighting, then you're probably going to be able to run a business together. But if you're the type of couple that like needs to have the TV on 24/7 to spend time together, then it's probably not going to work out very well.
Right.
Or if one person is really into the business and the other person just thinks of it as like their hobby, that often ends up like splitting the couple as well, or
right.
tanking the business.
And that's also where people tank their careers. Because next week I'm doing a talk about how to, is it time to divorce your career, or is it time to just put it in for the long haul? Because I really think sometimes designers can get to the burnout stage. And we're going to talk about that in a minute, because this is kind of what this is. When if you can work your passion, then you have less burnout. But there is that struggle when your spouse doesn't work with you and they don't see that. So that was an issue for your wife. She would be like, hey, let's hang out. And you're like, I gotta work. And now sometimes you said, sometimes it's the other way around. You're like, yeah, I can do this on Monday. And she's like, no, you need to get this done. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, it's definitely flipped, where it was always me talking about what needs to get done for my clients, and she was always confused, wondering like, well, why do you care so much about what happened, like this deadline, or like, why are you working a weekend for this client? And then it flipped eventually to the point where she's like, honey, I'm sorry, but we can't go out tonight, or we can't do this, or we can't do whatever, because I need to get some work done. So it's now kind of a good balance. I also saw Dan asked a question of who does the cooking and cleaning then. So that's a very good question. So again, as small business owners, we've had to like design our entire life around this business, because it takes a lot of work. So often what we do is we do the cooking all on over the weekend, and do like bulk, kind of like this talk, one pot meals where we can eat it for lunch and dinner all the rest of the week. And then cleaning happens, occasionally on weekends, like once every weekend or once every other weekend or something. We'll collaborate on that. Mostly Jen really likes cleaning and I really like cooking. So often we divide and conquer that way.
So, but you also, you live really close. So you don't have a commute. You've chosen to be able to bike or walk to work. So that also cuts down a lot of time. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of part of our sustainability ethos. So I guess a quick jump back, when we were in Charlotte, North Carolina, working out there, both working for companies, and both had great jobs, but we got to the point where we were burnt out and thought maybe there was something more to life. So we took some time off and went and traveled. Long story short, two things I learned during that time were that somebody out there designs for cool things like breweries, and somebody out there designs for nonprofits, and somebody out there does, any kind of thing that you could possibly think or love. Somebody out there is designing it. So why not, when I go back, why not let me, or why shouldn't I focus on doing stuff I believe in? And then the other lesson was the rest of the world cares or follows the United States a lot more than we follow them. They know about our politics. They know about different laws we pass because it affects the rest of the world. What we do here has a ripple effect everywhere else. For example, a chip bag that you design in your Chicago office that ends up in Cambodia, people eat that, but they don't have a good waste management system. So they end up throwing it in a hole in their front yard and burning it, which, as you can imagine, is not healthy for the person or the environment. So I realized that when I went back, or came back to the United States and did something new with my life, I wanted to design for projects I believe in and do it in a more responsible way, whatever that meant. Now I've kind of forgot what the question was, though.
I think it was, hang on. It was about, was it one I asked, or was it one from the thing? Was it about, I don't know. I have ADD. Here we go.
Yeah. So I was answering like how I ended up coming to, living where I work. So part of our sustainable design studio was being more sustainable and responsible all around. And one of the things that we try to do is live without a car. So that was one of the reasons we moved to Seattle, actually, is because it's much easier to do that here than in Madison, Wisconsin, where we started up. So it was possible there, and we did it, but it was harder. So here we live in a tiny studio apartment about 2 or 3 blocks away from where we work, so that we don't have to drive to work every day, and so we don't lose an hour in commute time, which gives us more time to either work or try to have some sort of life outside of work. And it saves us like $5,000 or $10,000 a year per car on gas, insurance, all that kind of stuff. So it's a big money saver as well. And then, of course, from an environment and fitness standpoint, we're constantly walking everywhere instead of using fossil fuels.
Right. Okay. So you talk about combining work and passion, and that was what our first poll was about. So I want to read you what the end was. So the poll was, how many of you feel like you're doing work that you're passionate about? And 22% said yes. Nobody said none at all. So that's great. But most of the people, 78%, said they're doing it somewhat, but they'd like to do more. So do you have tell us how and you've kind of talked a little bit, but tell us, like, the first one, was it that bakery when you were taking those business classes? That's not your only client. You still had other things, but you just eased them in? Or can you kind of give us a little recipe for success on that?
Yeah. So first off, definitely spend some time figuring out what it is that you're passionate about and what you want to do and what kinds of things you like doing and what kinds of things people are willing to pay for. I have this whole kind of personal retreat thing that I do where I'll lock myself in a room and just think like, okay, here's where I'm at, here's what I like doing, here's what I don't like doing, and how can I get more of what I like doing and less of what I don't like doing. So first of all, definitely spend some time thinking about you, who you are, and what makes you tick. Second of all, though, I'll have to say that a lot of people I talk to think they're stuck in some way, think they're stuck in, if they've only have experience doing design for banks, for example, they think, well, that's the only the work I'll ever get from now on. Right. And while that's the case, if that's the only thing you're ever going to show, it's not the case long term. There's always ways to switch to another field. For example, when I started Modern Species, I had no experience in designing for food companies, no experience in designing packaging. The only thing I had was designing brands for small companies. So I started there, and I just started picking industries that I'd want to work for. And over time, I found ones that I didn't like working in anymore, like small nonprofits, really inefficient, usually don't have much of a budget, and terrible project management, and a bunch of other things. So over time, you set a goal of working in a certain industry, and you start taking steps towards that. For one tip that I got from Frank Camaro, or Chamero, however you pronounce his last name, when I was having a beer with him after a talk that he did in Wisconsin, I asked him how he just basically has such enjoyable projects. Like, it seems that he has no pay the bills, boring work at all. Right. And what he told me was, You put the type of work you want to do on your website and nothing more, and that's the type of work you'll get. And although that seems kind of obvious, it kind of blew my mind because I didn't really think about that at the time. Designers by default seem to think we need to show everything that we've ever done and show all the different range of what we do. But if you're really interested in doing rock posters for bands, for example, do a bunch of posters in your spare time, put those up on your website, and slowly take off the stuff you don't want to do. And the weird
Right.
magical scenario is that if that stuff's on your website and that's the stuff you tell people that you do, that kind of work will find you. And then a few years later, all of a sudden you do almost exclusively rock posters for bands. It's really crazy.
So,
On that note, I'm also realizing my battery's running low. I didn't
okay.
realize how much we will hang on to that. So I'm going to switch to a different location where my cord is.
Okay.
And then we'll continue.
So one thing I thought, I loved that that example that Frank gave you because I thought, oh wow, I totally am like that. And I think that we have that I don't know, that urge to kind of share what we can do and kind of be that one-stop shop instead of, and I think especially when you're younger and you're trying to grow your business, you're having to have some of those things on there. But when you're really trying to focus and you're able to focus, you kind of have some clients already, you can really say, hey, you can put that stuff on there and you can do some other things, or you can get them to those other steps. But I thought that was really powerful. And then you were able to change your business from that.
Absolutely. I mean, when I started Gage Mitchell Design, which it started as, I had a whole range of stuff from residential developments to nonprofit soccer foundations to Girls on the Run to 24 Hours of Booty, all sorts of like nonprofit stuff, but then also more corporate kind of things. And that was just me showing my capabilities. But when I talk to people, I would say, I want to do sustainable design for whatever XYZ companies. At the time, I thought beer would be an awesome one. I just slowly realized that the small breweries don't have any money whatsoever. So unless I wanted to do pro bono all the time, that would be difficult. And the big breweries, it was a little harder for me to compete at the time. But food was accessible. You know, I could do some more food stuff. And I did some beer festivals and other things. But I would start telling people what I want to do, and then those kind of opportunities would come, and one by one, I would add those new projects up on my website and take something off that I don't want to do. And over time, I was able to gain that confidence to remove the rest of the stuff that I don't want to do and clearly say on the homepage of my website exactly what I do and who we do it for, so that we set up that scenario where people like that find us. Like, we have the benefit of having clients from all around the world, and they find us because we're very clear and stating exactly what we do and who we want to do it for.
And I think, that stuff, when you're growing a business, you state something. And I do think sometimes it changes. Like you're saying, hey, I decided I didn't want to work with those people. I wanted to do more work with this. It's not like, hey, this is what I said I'm going to do. I'm locked in. I can't do anything else. And that kind of goes into the next question. I really do feel like your career can be. Now, a lot of times I was doing some research for my Rapid Recharge next week, and it's talking about how many careers we hold before the age of 40, and how many jobs we hold before the age of 40, which I think is pretty amazing. And I'll tell you next week, so tune in live. But it was shocking to me. And, it's like, my dad had he had lots of jobs at Georgia Power, but he, always worked for Georgia Power. I mean, he had other jobs when he was a kid and when he was in undergrad and stuff like that, but pretty much he worked for Georgia Power my whole life. Really, that's very rare. Most people, only stay at a job. If you stay at a job 5 years, that's kind of a long time. And if you stay 10 years or over, it's like, oh, clearly you're not moving on. You're just stuck in this spot. But when you own your own business, it's a little different, I think. But I think there is that marriage, and it's how do you keep it fresh? No, not with your wife, but with your career. So can you give us any tips on how you've been able to do that?
Yeah. And hopefully I don't derail myself, but as you were talking about that, I have definitely noticed that people don't necessarily work for one company for their whole career anymore. I think the shift is that whereas it used to just be hard to hold a steady job because the economy was in flux or whatever else. And if you got that job that paid well and had good benefits, you held on to that and you stayed there and you committed to that company and they committed to you. Whereas now I think the shift is more committing yourself to a career focus and not necessarily any one particular company. And so one thing about my recipe for a one-pot life is if you find the things that you're passionate about and slowly but surely throughout your life, you weave more and more of those things into your work, that is your new career. And as long as you stay focused on being true to you, your career will continue to develop no matter who you're working for. And it will all those different experiences will eventually connect into one mega career, which I think is awesome. Yeah, it would be nice if people stuck around with companies longer these days, but I think as long as you're being true to you, then it's not as big of a deal. So the question was, how do you keep your kind of stay fresh and keep your perspective with your company or your career?
Right.
So for me, I think one benefit, and I didn't really realize this until I was talking to a mentor of mine who told me the fact that because he has a multifaceted persona, identity, or career field, his work life is much more resilient than if he only cared about design. Okay, so let's say if all you care about is design, and then all of a sudden you need to change your career, and now you're a paper rep. You might be really depressed about that because you really love and miss design, and that's all you cared about. But if what you really care about is beautiful printed pieces or the communication of things or beauty or quality of production, or if you care about ideas or whatever else, like whatever's you're passionate about, then no matter what job you have, you can still fulfill that passion, and it won't hurt as much when you lose whatever one passion you had. So I think for me, I have the benefit of loving business and loving design and loving food and all these other things. So when I get burnt out on designing, I get to switch to doing project management or thinking about business strategy. When I get burnt out on business, I get to jump in and do some design or try some of the delicious food samples our clients send us or go to a food festival or whatever and reignite my passion again. So for me, I absolutely get tired and I get burnt out and whatever because I'm just working around the clock. But it's not detrimental to me in my career because I can always shift to one of my other passions temporarily until I'm recharged again. So for me, I'm just constantly recharging myself by weaving back and forth throughout my different passions.
So I think that's important. I think also running your own company, it's harder to get bored. If you have one hat that you wear all the time, of course I think you would get burned out. But yeah. I still think, and you talked a little bit like, hey, I decided I didn't want to work for this type of client. I think that's another way to like really say, hey, here's another area that I think sustainable design could really help this industry that's really not touching. So it's like attacking something and seeing a difference, seeing a change. I think when I have a client who's like, they see their numbers go up or they whatever with something that I helped them with, that makes it huge. And I love that part. So I think it's about trying new challenges. And I do think when you're learning something new, like I have a client and I've been doing some video stuff for my course that I launched, but I'd like to do some of that, telling that story with video in another way. So I said, hey, I will do this for free for you. If you do it my way, I'm going to write this script and I'm going to do, and I think you have to challenge yourself with new things. I have definitely seen people in all different industries. They just look like they're like punching the clock, I'm just got to get out of here. I'm just so sick of this. And I don't feel that way. And I feel really blessed that I don't feel that way. And I think you feel that way too. Like I think you feel blessed that you are the entrepreneur and the designer that you are.
Yeah. And I'm not going to lie. There are definitely times where I get stressed and burnt and start thinking, shit, what am I doing? Like, why am I running a business? I could just go get a job and make twice as much money and have an easier life. But it's the fact that I do really love the clients I work for and the types of impact I'm trying to make. And when I think about going and doing that somewhere else, it's a harder sell. I could go get a job at a company that does the kind of stuff I do and still feel happy, or go work internally with one of my clients. So there's always options, but you're right that running a business, you're constantly distracted by one challenge or another, and that helps. But also pursuing our professional development is huge. Like, I can't say enough about how right you are there, that if you're constantly learning and growing yourself, then you'll never get bored. Take on a new challenge, take on something else within the company you're working for, like ask for more responsibility or ask to start a new initiative within the company. Do whatever you need to do to push yourself and continue to grow. And again, like I said before, once you stop learning and developing at that company, either ask for more or get out of there. Because if you're not growing, then you'll stagnate and get burnt out.
So Amy has something kind of from another point. Amy had worked at the wrong career. I'm totally reading your thing here, Amy. But I did talk to her about this, and it was after your talk at RAGA, is what I'm calling it now, AIGA Raleigh. Anyway, she was saying, hey, I worked she was it was like in video, I think, right, Amy? 11 years in the wrong career. And so how do you know when you are in the wrong career? Because maybe this part of design, and luckily design's really big and you can do lots of different things, I think. How do you touch on that? And how do you know when hey, you know what, it's the end?
Yeah, I think if something feels wrong, it probably is. And again, I go back to saying, I would spend some time, like, clear your schedule, get a babysitter, do whatever you need to do, go to a hotel if you need to get away, but just find some time to lock yourself in a room with no technology devices, just like a notepad, paper, and food, and figure out what it is that makes you tick. Like, write down all the things that you're not liking about your current life or your current job. Write down your top 5 priorities in life. Write down the things you love doing, and just do that for at least a full day. And the next day, like a full day, I mean like 4 or 5 hours. And the next day you come back with a fresh mind, and you think about all the patterns you see in that research and figure out where else you could go. What you might find is that you love everything about your life except the current boss that you have, or your coworker, or you just don't like the topic of thing you're working on, and maybe you can ask for a transfer. Or you might find out that you need to make a really big change. And I saw that Amy said something about fear and apprehension. Mm-hmm. Kind of holds people back, and that is totally true. I would say that is probably the cause of like 90% of people out there who hate their job and stay in it. It's just that fear. And one piece of advice I tell people around that, I can't claim to have come up with it on my own. I got it from a book called The 4-Hour Workweek by Timothy Ferriss. Mm-hmm. There's some stuff in that book that I don't totally agree with, because it's a little bit of a slippery slope on ethics. But one piece of advice he has in there is about getting over this fear. So he has you go through an exercise where you write down, or you just think about the absolute worst case scenario for what could happen if you make this change, whatever change it is, quitting your job and getting a different career, going back to school, asking your boss for a transfer, whatever. You think about the absolute worst case scenario. And then after you've done that and scared the crap out of yourself, you then work backwards and think, well, what could I do to get myself out of this situation once I'm in the muck? And what this often does is it shows you that not only are you an intelligent and resilient person, but that you have a close network of family and friends and colleagues and anyone else who would be happy to help you figure out how to rebuild your life or get back to what you wanted to do. And in the end, you realize that the risk is much lower than the reward. Almost everything, like even if whatever you do causes you to go bankrupt or causes you to get fired or something, I don't know, whatever is most people's worst case scenario. When you think about how relatively easy for most of us it is to get out of that situation again, then you'll realize that, you know what, my life is more important than succumbing to this fear, and I'm going to take the chance and I'm going to go out there and do it. And pro tip, it almost never, like 99% of the time, doesn't end up the worst case scenario. Often ends up much better than you imagine. And that it's that fear that's constantly holding you back and trying to convince you not to take a risk. But if you can get past that fear, you'll be in a much better spot.
All right, so I'm going to do the next poll. Are y'all ready? All right, so it says, how many of you struggle with the hustle versus work balance message? And so I think you can click the thing now, I hope. But I do think some people over there in the chat have said some great things. So Brian said, hey, sometimes I've been at a job where, yes, design is really big, but I've just been in a job. I've been frustrated with the boss or the client or whatever. And sometimes I just wanted to work in a warehouse to just, have that punch in, punch out job. But I think that's
Absolutely.
where that's because you need to recharge, because you're so burned out that really punching you need to get bored of punching just doing, making your widget or whatever you're doing. And then he said, working your passion project on the side. And that's also that building up of what you want to do. But I think what you said, Gage, is that you sat down and regularly you do this, not just like once 8 years ago, you sat down and did this, but it's something regular. You lock yourself in a room and you ask yourself, questions that are really digging down to see who you are and who you are today and who you want to be.
Yeah, and that's because your life and your priorities are in your situation is constantly changing. So figuring out your life path once doesn't make sense. You've got to constantly reevaluate. And to Brian's point, absolutely, like working in a creative field like this, there's no way you could constantly be coming up with brilliant new ideas and executing them amazingly without some occasional downtime or repetitive work to take your mind off of that. It's coming up with new stuff is super stressful. So even within your current job or whatever, like if you have a division between like more production type tasks where you can just do some resizing of ads or organize the file system or, clean up the office or help the boss with some filing or something, I don't know. There's always more work to be done in a company. And if you just tell your boss where you're at, what your situation is, unless they're completely evil, they'll probably understand and try to help you find something to do to switch gears for a little bit. And again, I go back to, this isn't something that you have to run your own company to do. Like you can find ways within your existing job to get more joy and more passion out of your work. And if you approach this with your boss and they say no, then you should probably quit that job because they don't care about you as a person, as a professional. Maybe not quit it right away, but that's your cue to start looking for something where you could be more passionate, because there are other opportunities out there and there are other companies who do help their employees develop professionally.
And also, if it's like something that you're interested in and you want to take a class in, then maybe if you say, hey, I don't know how this will work, but this is something I'm interested in. Would you let me go to this conference, or would you let me take this class or something?
Absolutely.
Because if you're thinking how to help that company grow, and if they're thinking about how to help you grow, then you're going to combine those things together. And I think, sometimes
it's a benefit to you and the company.
Absolutely. And it's about you thinking like a business person for the company instead of just like an employee, I guess. And, I think Brian and Joe is having great, like Joe says, he worked a phone sales job while he got his clothing company and screen printing studio off the ground, as opposed to taking a job at a place that I'd grow to hate because I wasn't pushing my passion. And I think that's smart. That's a smart kind of business decision, because it's not.
I worked at the Apple retail store and at Johnston & Murphy shoe store in Charlotte when I was looking for my job too. And, I've done all sorts of random jobs or projects to get by while I'm trying to pursue something more interesting. And to your point, Diane, absolutely. Like you should, if your job currently isn't satisfying during your day job, then absolutely do something on the side that you can get that passion, get that feeling of excitement and reward. And then eventually that could end up being your full-time gig. That's where probably 50% of design businesses start, is by pursuing something on the side that leads into a full-time gig later. Or at the very least, it'll show you what you actually like doing, and maybe you can pursue more of that at your current job or at a different job.
But I still think like the Apple retail is still, it gives you stuff that you can learn in your business because you're going to be on a Mac. I still think
always be strategic with your jobs.
Yeah. I mean, anyway.
Free iPods and discounted software and everything was always awesome.
Right. So All right, so I had one other question, and we'll have to do a part 2 because we don't have enough time. But in maybe 5 minutes, you started talking a little bit about community and friends and family and how these people are supporting you. Talk a little bit about the AIGA community, because you're president of AIGA Seattle. Can you tell us a little bit about why any kind of design community, it doesn't have to be AIGA or RAGA or whatever it is, but I'm a big member of AIGA as well. So can you talk a little bit about how that's impacted you, maybe from North Carolina to everywhere, Wisconsin?
Wisconsin, North Carolina, Colorado, and Washington. Yes. So I first drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, of AIGA when I was in school at Colorado State University. And when I was getting close to graduation time, I asked my older sister, who was working in New York at Colhan at the time, what her coworkers, because she worked with some designers there, what her coworkers had advice for me for getting a job when I graduated. And the two things I remember most were, one, show your portfolio to as many people as possible to get practice talking about your work. And two, join AIGA. And I had no idea what AIGA was at that time and how to go about that. So I looked into it, found out there was such thing as student chapters or student groups. And so I talked to my professors. They said there wasn't one, and if I wanted to start one, I'd have to do it myself. So I decided to do that. So I started a student chapter in school, and through that, I feel like I started developing a leader, and influence in every state / city I've been involved in. I've gotten involved in AIGA in some way or another, particularly on the board, either a programming role or operations, sustainability, or something. For me, it's been powerful for my career in teaching me leadership skills and allowing me to explore, like, say, management skills. Like right now as the president, I manage like 80-something people, more or less, and that's an awesome opportunity. When my design studio is only 3 people, this is a great opportunity for me to learn new techniques in management. It's also great to figure out to flex your strategy skills, or to do some volunteer design work, or just to meet a bunch of really awesome, influential people in the community. I can't say enough about how much I've learned from all the people I've met. Turning into a robot. 1 second.
Oh no, now you sound okay. It sounded bad for a while. It's okay. I think it's better now. I can hear you better now. I thought it was just me, and I was like fumbling with my things.
All right, is this better? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and it sounds okay. So Joe says it's good. Okay, it's better now. Okay. It was like when I was like having to turn you up all the way. I didn't know. Okay, we're back.
This headset tends to robot after a little while, so sorry about that, team. Anyway, so long story short, AIGA is a great way to be involved in the community, and for me, selfishly, to influence the community into being what I want it to be. So I get to like bring sustainability or, whatever else I'm into the community. Then also just meeting a bunch of amazing people that will be lifelong friends from all across the country. And then again, it's a great platform to develop leadership skills, strategy skills, writing skills, design skills, whatever else you want to dabble in. This is a great place to do it, to try to test out some of those skills as you're developing them.
So we had 80% of people say that they do struggle with, let's see if I can, they struggle with the hustle versus the work-life balance. That 80% of people, 20% said, no, I don't have a problem with that. But I think I think that's something that AIGA can work with. I forgot to make it bigger, sorry. Anyway, AIGA, that's another part that I think that we need to, and I think that AIGA Raleigh, just because I know Lenny and Amy, and they do some scholarships and they help people to get their passion kind of growing. And I think that's another way, because sometimes you just need that community of people to believe in your project, even if it's a side project or something. I think that really helps. It's because sometimes your friends and family and your spouse doesn't believe.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a bunch of people who actually understand you when you're talking about, kerning or colors or anything else, whereas a lot of people in life don't get you, and this is a great place to be amongst people with people who are on the board for a long time. Like when you go to the AIGA National Retreat, I always say that that's basically like the family reunion that I actually want to go to, because it's a group full of people that are both simultaneously a family and all your best friends at the same time.
So I'm going to share your stuff again. Your website is modernspecies.com, and then you can connect with him on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm going to post both of those at MODSPEC.
Yeah, mod spec.
Yeah. So
someone stole Modern Species.
If you guys don't have any other questions, we're going to close it. Thank you so much. And if you want to join me next week, or if you have a question for me, you can always reach me at diane@rechargingyou.com. And I'm trying to give you all the rest of mine. Facebook, you can get, it's, I don't even know if I have the right one. It's just Design Recharge. And then Instagram and Twitter is the same. Oh, here it is. I knew I had it typed out somewhere. It's just about copying and pasting now. At Design Recharge, it's a good way to get to me. And then if you want to find out more about my course, which really helps you, makes you question yourself and answer a bunch of questions about yourself and the things that you love. And I can't type it fast enough because I can't talk and type. I don't know if other people, are you like that, Gage? Can you talk and type?
No, it's impossible.
Yeah, that's what I think too. Okay, so I did it. So if you want to find out more, you can check it out at findingyoursuperpower.com. And there it is, so you can check it out. But Gage, thank you. I know we didn't get through all of them. We did good on our segmentation, so I was proud, but we'll have to have you back, and I'm glad that you'll get back. So
yeah, happy to come back and talk more specifically about sustainability or running a business or whatever other topics. So it was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. And thank you guys for being here. I really appreciate it. And thanks, Joe, for posting that AIGA.org/join. So awesome. Give it a little bit of love. All right. Oh, Dan says, do you have that link for the blog post about working with your spouse? Can you grab that?
I can.
Or you can send it to me and I can put it below the thing on the site if you want. Either way. I don't know if you can find it quick enough.
I will see real quick. Staying married while running a business.
There you go. Hopefully that'll help, Dan.
There we go. Boom.
Awesome.
Our
Thank
search
you
feature
so
on
much.
our site works pretty well. I'm excited.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, I'm glad you guys were all here. Thank you. And I'll see you next week. And we're going to talk about, is it time to divorce your career? Amy, I should have probably had you on to talk about divorcing your first career. Anyway, thank you guys, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Cheers.